Hey, I wanted to do a video on something I've been focused quite a lot on in the last 48 hours, and that is this Tesla believes FSD supervised will require regulatory approval in Australia. So this is a story that I posted yesterday. I've added to it today, and this came about because I was able to verify that Tesla believes that this is the case, and that raises the question: where is this legislation, regulatory approval? What is it about Australian road rules, laws, etc., that mean that that would be the case? Because everything I understood to date was that what's available or coming in FSD supervised doesn't move the needle enough to require that. And so let's have a look through the article and talk through sort of my line of thinking. And if somebody has different thoughts and opinions, absolutely leave a comment. I'm keen to hear what other people's thoughts are. And if we can track down what this regulation is, that's an important piece of the puzzle. The reason that's important, let's get to that now. So basically in the US this week with the earnings call from quarter one, we understand that the full self-driving, previously beta but now supervised, basically is available as a trial to everybody who has compatible cars. So that's somewhere around 1.8 million cars, and they said the take rate's around 50%. So somewhere in the order of 900,000 Tesla owners have FSD supervised on their car. So the next piece of this is, when are we getting in Australia? Because you watch the YouTube videos, it looks amazing, and yeah, I think there's a lot of Tesla owners, a lot of potential Tesla owners that are keen to understand when this software upgrade would be available here. So I first wanted to focus on what the differences are between what we have today. Like, FSD has been for sale for forever in Australia, and that gets you basically these features here. So I spelled it out. The normal FSD features including enhanced autopilot, navigator on autopilot, auto lane change, auto park, summon, smart summon, traffic light, stop sight, and control. So if you buy FSD today, that is what you get. What you don't get is the thing in the under the upcoming heading, which is auto steer on city streets. So it's just like a one-liner. Doesn't sound like much. It just sort of adds to this list we already have, but it's massive, right? Because actually when you unpack that, the differences are, as I've pointed out here, these bullet points here. So autopilot can be enabled on roads without lane markings. So if I'm using autopilot right now and I head out of my estate, many of those sort of smaller roads are not marked with white painted lines on either side. And so I can't enable it until I get out to sort of a major road, and then I can. So that sort of, it changes the places that you can enable it, but doesn't really change the functionality. The next one is interesting. So if you are stopped at a traffic light or a stop sign or something, and the car is on a navigating route, it's going to navigate around that corner, and it could take a 90-degree turn. What's interesting about a 90-degree turn? Well, the car already takes turns. We know that when it's on autopilot and keeping lane centered. So 90 degrees is really just a sharper turn that it already does. When you talk about it like that, it doesn't seem like it's a dramatic leap forward. So yeah, that doesn't seem like a dramatic shift either. The fact that it can do a sharper radius of a corner. The next one is being able to navigate single lane dual roundabouts. Technically very difficult. There's a lot of things that happen when you go into roundabouts, particularly the double lane roundabouts. Trucks, for example, are allowed to sit in the center of those lanes to make sure nobody darts up the inside and then causes a collision. Some people straight line roundabouts, which is amazing. So opportunities for things to go poorly are quite high, but that's down to the technical ability. And if Tesla believes it's ready, and we see from the videos in the States, it's doing quite an impressive job of roundabouts. So I'd be very keen to try that out, because I regularly encounter multiple roundabouts. They seem to love them here, and we hit something in the order of about 16 every day, or most days. So that would be, in terms of my regular commutes, the thing that mean I can't enable it and get from A to B are those two things, which is I can't use it from where my house is out to the main infrastructure road, And then the other part is I have to disable and get through the roundabouts, and then re-enable it multiple times. That, for me, would allow me to basically get A to B without really intervening, just monitoring it, paying attention, putting the torque in the steering wheel, that kind of thing. The next one, accelerating away from a stop. So currently, if you've got full self-driving, and it does this part here, the traffic light and stop sign control, it will slow you, it will stop you, but then at that point it displays on the screen and says you've got to take over and accelerate away from that stop. So again, it feels like a really small change. Obviously, it's monitoring the environment around it. It knows the lights turn green and that it's safe to proceed. Or in the instance of like a T section or a four-way stop, it's going to monitor the vehicles and other road users. And then when it's safe and it can plot a path through that environment, it's going to start and take you, accelerate away from the stop. So that doesn't seem like a dramatic shift either from where we are today. Next one, navigating around a stopped vehicle, i.e. double parked or debris. So the reason that this is maybe the potential biggest challenge is that it does involve navigating over the solid line sometimes. And, if you've just finished, if you're a new driver and you've just finished reading your road rules, you're like, hey, that's not allowed. You've got to stay in your lane. You've got to, not cross over the lanes. But when you read through the regulations and laws and that sort of stuff, and I've done quite a bit of that over the last couple of days, is that there are actually provisions for going around obstacles. And that's when the vehicle would do that. And we've seen videos of that occurring in the States, in Canada. And yeah, that's I think a perfectly, I would think, and others can disagree, but I would think the car is going to need to do that. If we have semi-autonomous, autonomous in the future, it's going to need to do those things. At the moment, this level is still obviously monitored and supervised by the user, and they can always take over. If there are high levels of autonomy, if Tesla was to go for a level 3, 4 or 5 in terms of their capabilities, and that's definitely the direction they're aiming for with robotaxi in the future, then it would require extra regulation. 1000% agree with that. But just as it stands today, could they ship FSD Supervised into Australia? Nothing about what I've seen so far really tells me that they can't. The final one here in this list is that it can automatically indicate for turns. So, you can imagine if there was some kind of legislation that said the user must initiate the indicator or something weird like that. These regulations are often written at a time that never imagined that the computer could be doing this for you. And so just out of a nature, of a symptom of time, basically, that could be the result. But I actually don't think that I've seen anything that indicates that's a problem for us either. So if that is the case, we're basically still rating this as a level 2 plus car. Of course, there's the SAE levels of autonomy, and level 2 doesn't really tip you into, well, none of what we've talked about tips you into like a level 3, which would require regulation for sure. So this week, or yesterday, Elon posted and said, to this reply from Holmars, when they were basically showing off the fact that FSD is now, it's being shown to regulators in Europe or in Germany specifically. And so there's now been videos and stuff of this occurring. It looks like it's performing really well. That's obviously a left-hand drive market. Elon follows up and says, we believe version 12 is ready for supervised FSD in left-hand drive countries, which there are many, obviously. And, we're here in Australia. We're hoping that we're somewhere near the top of the list of where it's going to roll out to. And then he hits us with this and says, right-hand drive will take a little bit longer. What's a bit longer? Who knows? He could be talking a matter of months with the rate of improvement. It's unclear. But it could also be years. That's not clear either. So let's this is where I could sort of continue my line of thinking, which is assuming Tesla's can spin this data engine, can keep the training data coming in, can solve any edge cases. For the most part, the driving is basically sorted, keeping in the lanes, accelerating, braking, avoiding, vulnerable road users, all that sort of stuff for the most part is there and it's happening. But now we're really sort of hunting edge cases. And so what happens is they identify an issue or an area for opportunity, improvement, and then they put basically like a instruction out to the fleet to say, if you see any examples of this, send back the video data to us, and then they review it and say, okay, that's a good example of how the user navigated it, or they find new examples of how the user should navigate through an environment like that, and then they just find maybe sometimes millions of examples of that, feed that into the model, build a new version of the software, distribute that to the cars, and that edge case will basically be resolved. That's kind of the theory. And if you do that enough times and you get all of the edge cases, or enough of them where the chance that you encounter an edge case that it can't resolve or can't navigate its way through, they're so dramatically rare and exceptional that it's way safer than a human. So that's what we're, the kind of the directional of where we're heading, and this data engine keeps spinning, and basically what pops out for us is a new software release. So they're at like 12.3 at the moment, 12.3.5 I think is the latest release. Elon's spoken about 12.4, 12.5 that are in the pipeline, and each one of those is getting new functionality and solving more problems. So what I don't want to happen is for them to get to a point where technically the software is amazing and it's doing all these things and it's ready, and we turn to Australia and go, can we deploy it in Australia? And then we start the process of doing the regulatory approvals if they're required. So if you do that, then obviously we're going to have this massive delay in its delivery here. What I'd rather do is be able to identify now what those hurdles are, get after them, start moving those, cogs in the government, whatever it takes to get that approval in place so that when it's technically ready, let's say by the end of the year, that Tesla can ship the software here. Now, there's some really complex things that happen when you're talking about regulations of, what happens on our roads. And one of those complexities are basically what's happening in the industry. So there is a public consultation right now from the National Transport Commission, which is basically working with the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communities and Arts. And this consultation paper basically outlines the direction that they're heading into the future, with what they're really aiming for is ADS. And they sort of define ADS in a number of different ways. Ultimately, automated driving systems is able to drive without a human input or attention. Now, clearly, straight away when you read that, that's not what FSD Supervised is, because it requires your attention. And it uses two things to do that. Talk on the wheel at periodic intervals, but let's call it every 30 seconds, and driver monitoring through the interior camera in the car. So ADS is not what we're talking about with Supervised. If they go for level 3 or 4 or 5, it absolutely will be, and all of this will apply. So as I go on in the article, if I go back for a second, I just talk at a high level to say there's federal laws that feeds into the Australian design rules. I've read through a lot of those, particularly the steering one. I don't believe any of those are hurdles or would prevent FSD Supervised. Then we go into the National Transport Commission. What are they? What do they do for us? The fact that they've got this community consultation out. What they're aiming for is to have that all in place by 2026, because there's an estimation that autonomous vehicles will arrive from 26. I think that's flawed, because they're forecasting this is going to be a problem 20 to 32 months away. Clearly, when you look at what's happening in the industry, this stuff's moving really fast, especially at Tesla. I think, given that they've already got vehicles in the country that are capable of running this, I think this is going to happen way before that. And if we have to wait, we're here in April 24. If we really have to wait to sometime in 26 before we get this, the rest of the world is going to leave us behind. And I don't want that to happen. So this consultation's out. Basically, it's got references in it to, hey, look at Mercedes Drive Pilot. It's level 3 under a lot of conditions, but it's, classified as a level 3 system. You've got, some robo-taxis happening with Waymo in select areas, San Francisco, California, Phoenix, etc. Nowhere in that document does it mention Tesla. And those public consultations close 11th of June this year. So you can go and have your say, give feedback, that sort of stuff. There's some information sessions coming up in May, and then there's also some videos that are well worth watching to sort of understand what they're shooting for. Basically, all of this policy work is going to produce a new law, which is the Automated Vehicle Safety Law, or AVSL. So this was decided back in 2020 when all the ministers got together and they said, look, it's going to be crazy if we try and do this by the state legislation, which a lot of our road rules and conditions on our roads and the vehicles we put on our roads, they're all, effectively administered by the state-based regulator. So in Victoria, where I am, Vic Roads, for example, are going to have the say over what happens on the state. So clearly, if you have an autonomous vehicle, and I'm here in Albury-Wodonga, there's just a river separating those two towns, and I fire up my Robotaxi app, and I say I want to ride, and I want to go to the Albury airport. It's going to have to transit between those two states, so having state-based legislation is problematic. Immediately we can all agree. So they've got in a room and they said, look, that's crazy. Let's build a national standard. Let's get all the state-based legislation aligned so that effectively what they're gearing up for is a time where a autonomous vehicle manufacturer can put that into the country and it effectively just work anywhere in the country. That's great. Amazing objective. Completely on board. That's what needs to happen. That's a discussion about the future, not a discussion about what happens today. So I just sort of continue to work through that. And then if you're going to be a provider of autonomy, you effectively, the proposal is you would need to apply for certification to do that. So here are the conditions. And there's two ways. You can either ship a full robotaxi basically, or you might have a vehicle that's already in Australia and you might be able to turn it into one through a software update. So they're kind of cognizant of the fact that could be a potential avenue of how these get on the roads. So public consultation. There's a video here that talks about the benefits, which is actually really good from NTC. The problem is that the video had yesterday when I looked at it, just 46 views. And so clearly if you put this thing out to the public for consultation and only 46 people have viewed your video, it's kind of not hitting where it needs to. But the key takeaway here is when we do get to autonomous vehicles, it's going to be saving lives, a lot of money, a lot of wasted time, that sort of stuff for businesses, etc. And back in, the CEO of NTC basically highlighted that back in 2016 they reviewed, things might have moved on from there, that's nearly 8 years ago. There at the stage was around 700 barriers in terms of state and territory Commonwealth law, and hence the motivation to go and fix that legislative issue there. So there's just more information here where I've sort of dived in and continue to make my case, but this does not, there are currently no ADRs specific to the ADS, so the Act does not explicitly prevent vehicles with an ADS from entering Australia via this pathway. They're kind of identifying that there's a gap in the legislation there. Again, based on our earlier definition, FSD Supervised is not an ADS. As they go into more detail and we look at the state-based stuff, they talk about automated vehicle trials, and these are, like a Waymo if they're actually going to go and trial it, or we've seen a bunch of different shuttle trials, bus-style kind of vehicles. That's not what FSD is, and there's certain references to whether it's a consumer-level vehicle or whether it's basically like a research project. And there's certain autonomous vehicles that happen in the mines, etc., that definitely fall into that. But that's outside of what we're talking about. And just to highlight here, the state and territories, New South Wales, Victoria, every state has their own sort of governing body, and each one of those might have different, there's Victorian references, but, different road laws that govern what happens on the road. So I don't envy Tesla or any other manufacturer trying to enter vehicles into this country. It's an incredibly complex landscape, and I hope that the future does sort that out and make it simpler, because I could see a number of them just not wanting to deal with all this and go to other countries first. We do need to keep in mind that, we're a relatively small country with like 26, 27 million people in it, compared to some of the others. The opportunity for delivering robotaxi into China, India, America, Europe, they're just bigger populations, more people, more potential to make money. So you could see them going there first. I'm very impressed that, Tesla's delivered what they have in Australia in terms of charging infrastructure and cars and that kind of thing. But I also want them to continue to be delivering the latest software here as well. So as part of sort of improving the situation, Australia kind of identified that, look, this is going to be really hard for those companies to go and even do it, uniquely to each country. And there's an opportunity that, some alignment to happen between, the UN, UNECE basically regulations, and they're trying to harmonise on the regulations as much as possible. So that's a sort of a future thing. I did just want to raise it, but it's not, I don't believe it's a prohibitor at all right now. It's not in place. We have some alignment between our ADRs and what they have at the UN, but not in terms of this autonomous or anything that I see that would represent a problem for us. So yeah, that's basically my take on it. There's been a lot of comments and interaction on Twitter. That's an amazing ad there. Thank you, Google. But yeah, that's it. That's my thoughts. Leave yours in the comments, and I hope you enjoyed the video and the article. Bye.